Hi, this is Gary Brown, and welcome to Sauntering with God. Welcome to your new life. In the last video, we talked about my season of letting go and the things that God had instructed me to stop, basically stop doing. We pick up the discussion in the interview with me beginning to talk about rest and how that after God had taken everything away, now I had a baseline. Now I could start to wait for Him to start filling in the blanks of my life. It's kind of like Abraham when God promised Isaac. I don't want to birth an Ishmael. I don't want to go find a handmaiden and try to create another child, because I think God needs me to help Him do His work. So as we jump into the interview in part 2, I hope that this is a real blessing to you. And you need to be asking yourself, do you need to go through a spiritual detox? Do you need to go through a season of letting go to get to this place of rest, to where you can know for sure that Christ is empowering you versus you doing things yourself? Are people seeing God at work through you, or they just see you doing good things in the name of God? I look forward to hopefully seeing you one day, and perhaps maybe we can have a chat about that in your life. Here's part 2. Jesus said in John 5, He said that the Son can do nothing by Himself. He can only do what He sees the Father doing. So I think what I had, put this way, I had to get rid of everything because I needed a baseline. I was discovering a baseline. In other words, what happened was I went through a season of letting go, went through a season of laying everything on the altar sacrifice, a season of just letting go of everything, so that when I emptied myself of myself, I now had a baseline. And that baseline is rest. And so you begin to rest in Christ to where you don't feel like you're responsible for anything anymore. Then what you begin to do is you begin to see, where is God working? What is God doing? And you wait for Christ to bring it to you.
Because you've learned to hear His still small voice or see His movement in your life.
Yes, that's what you learn after a while. And understand, you're talking about several years of detox by now, of where God has begun to show me the difference of what I'm initiating and what He's initiating.
That is huge.
That's big. Because
most of us live our life, I think, impugning, if that's the right word, that the motives, like God told me, and we're sure it's God.
Yeah.
So many times I've seen people say that, and then a month later, whatever it was that they were saying was God, completely blew up.
Yeah, it's because it was born of ourselves instead of from on high.
So it's easy to say those words.
Yeah, and I've learned not to say that. I learned to say I believe God is saying instead of I know. But Ron, I've learned a new definition for sin. Sin is self. Anything initiated by me is sinful. Only thing that's not sinful is the things that are initiated by God. So even the good things, it's easy for me to look at the evil in my life and say, oh, that doesn't need to be there. It's very difficult for me to look at the good things I was doing in my flesh for God, and looking at that as sin.
Kind of like the Apostle Paul. He certainly wasn't doing the bad sins. He was following the law to the letter. He was a good person on the outside.
Yeah, but as he says, that was all for naught. We read Paul saying, that he sacrificed everything for the cause of Christ, and that he wants nothing more than to know Christ. But I don't know that we totally understand what that means until we're willing to let go of everything. Everything, even the good things that we think we know and the good things that we think we're doing, we need to stop and just ask, God, is this you or is this me? And I like what Henry Blackaby said. I first discovered Henry Blackaby back in 1990s. I like what Henry Blackaby said when he said that the world doesn't need to see God's people doing good things in the name of God. The world needs to see God at work. And that it's not our job to come up with stuff it's not our responsibility to complete the Great Commission. It's not our responsibility to do God's will, actually, as much as it is. Our responsibility is to simply submit to Christ and allow Him to do His work through us, because they don't need to. Us doing good things in the name of God doesn't produce eternal fruit. God working in and through us, and people seeing God at work, that's what produces fruit, as Jesus said, fruit that lasts.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's all about, where are things initiated?
I think Blackaby also said, see where God is working and go there.
Yes. Yeah, don't try to do things for God. I like what Henry said. He said, don't just don't do something, sit there. And so I think
there's the being again.
Yeah, the American culture hammers it home to us that we are to produce. When Jesus said
Christianity.
Yes, when God says make disciples, He means that's our job. Get out there and make disciples. So we start building up all these processes and procedures in the church, and I just don't know that's how it's done. And I want to stop here and make a point. I'm not here trying to say that if you're involved politically that you're evil or wrong, or if you belong to a traditional American style church that you're wrong. I am not here proclaiming that are criticizing anybody's church or anybody's ministry or anybody's motives and what they feel like God's leading them to do. I'm only simply telling my story. And my story is that I was consumed in everything Gary. I thought it was my responsibility to get God's will done. Now I see it's just the opposite. God is the one that gets things done through me as I submit my life to Him and deny myself for Him to work through me.
We've kind of intimated at some of this, but what were some of the signs and symptoms that you had that led you to this process?
Just not seeing results, not seeing fruit that lasts, not really people being Christians their whole life, Ron.
No growth.
And have never made it a sign that God, they've never seen the fruit. And even in my own life, being so consumed in the structure of the church, and it was my responsibility to put together the service on Sunday morning. It was my responsibility to develop ministries. It was my responsibility to tell you what your role was by giving you some type of spiritual gift test or assessment, and plugging you into the system. Never did it ever cross my mind in the past of thinking, oh wow, why did God send Ron into my life? And I'm not trying to recruit you to my vision. I'm trying to find out what God's doing in you, and that my role as a pastor is to help put you in a position to where you can hear God speak, so that God can work through you. And my job is, what is the Spirit leading me to do to help you get that done? And that is just a completely different mindset than what I was trained in seminary, that I did in 43 years of pastoring. And so now, since 2020 and the retirement, when we get together next time, I want to bring you into the picture, because it's interesting how I met you. Ron, I met you after years of letting go. And I'd become fairly comfortable, in waiting on the Lord to see where He was working so I could join Him. And then comes Ron. I had no idea who you were. I had no idea or intention at all whatsoever to meet you. but yet for somehow, and it was completely the providence of God, it was God working through you and working through me that brought us together. We didn't even mean to meet. So when we get back together, I want us to talk about the work that God is now doing as a result of now you're taking a season of letting go. You're taking a season of learning to rest and learning how God brings things to you. So you've joined me in that, and so that's the reason I say we're partners, we're brothers together in what God's doing.
So if you were to summarize some of the lessons that you have learned or takeaways from this, I'm sure that there's been 2 or 3 that have really come to the surface for you.
Well, one is I don't think we understand the pull of the world, and I really don't think we understand just how swimming in that toxic American soup of production, of the gathering of wealth and seeking recognition. I think we way underestimate the pull of the world in our lives and the way that we've learned to think before we became a Christian. I think we way underestimate the process that we have to go through in order to rid ourselves of our former way of thinking in order for God to renew our mind. That's the first thing I've learned is that my flesh is a powerful taskmaster.
It's more than saying, I'm an American, and so I live in a Christian nation.
Yeah.
And so I'm a Christian.
Yeah, right. I would say secondly, is that I've learned that truly Isaiah is right. The best of my works are nothing more than a closet full of filthy rags. And that God does not want me to do for him. God is simply wanting me to join him in what he's doing. And so my primary work is to let go of myself, to learn to rest in his presence, and believing that God is capable of doing everything that he has set out to be done. And that what our role is simply is to partner together with him as he does it through us. I love what Paul said in Colossians. It's not that this is a lazy man's religion. Paul says, I struggle with all his strength.
Yes.
And that there is work, and there is a sense of busyness, and there is a sense of urgency, but it's Christ in us. It's what God's doing to complete his mission on this earth. We are living in the last days, and there, I get tired a lot from the things that I do, but the things that I do are Christ in me, and it's accomplishing what he wants, and that's a huge difference.
Where do you feel like or why did you miss that after as long as you've been a Christian?
I've never seen it. I've never witnessed it. It's just I've been a part of the church machine my entire life.
And so you've read the words, you've preached on it, I'm sure.
Yeah,
you've preached through every book of the Bible, I'm sure, over 40 years.
Yeah.
And somehow
it just escapes you. It's just and it escapes most people. And it takes an intentional time to create space in your calendar and in your heart and your mind to enable God to rid you of everything that you thought and to fill you with everything that he is. Ron, I'll just put it this way. The Jesus I worship today is not the same Jesus that I preached 5 years ago. It's not exactly the same one. The Jesus 5 years ago gave me rules and gave me objectives, and I had to follow the rules, and I had to complete the objectives. The Jesus I know now tells me to rest in him, and he will work his life, and he will work his work through me. And I'm telling you, it makes a lot of difference.
Makes me just want to take a deep breath.
It does.
Just to be able to know that The burden, really, he doesn't want the burden to be on us.
No. His yoke is easy and his burden is light. I've read that somewhere.
Somewhere. I've heard that.
Yeah. Well, Ron, thank you. Thank you for doing this with me. And we'll pick it up next time, and we'll get very specific about once you learn to get into a mode of letting go, and you learn to rest, trusting that God can do things. You know, I tell people, for example, that it's my job to love people. It's God's job to change people. In other words, I've stopped trying to do God's work for him. I simply want to be that conduit, if you will, through which he does
And
work.
not have that inner pressure to fix people,
Or to
fix
win
programs,
people.
to make things happen.
Exactly. And so next time we get into specifics, I'm excited about that. Thank you. And thank you for listening. And again, sauntering is learning how to go on that casual stroll with God. It's learning how to let go, how to rest, and how to enable him to empower you. Next time we'll talk about the empowerment and the things specifically God is doing to change people's lives in our ministry. Hey, thanks for joining us. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the trail of life. Happy sauntering.